husband, the CEO, looked me in the eyes, smirked, and said, "Congratulations. You're terminated. My mistress will be taking your place. The divorce papers arrive tomorrow." He had no idea that with a single, secret email, I was about to watch his $100 financial empire burn to the ground. He thought he was playing a high-stakes chess game, but he had just handed me the queen. He didn't know I had already made my move. If you've ever been betrayed and dreamed of getting even, drop a fire emoji in the comments. This is not just my revenge story. It's a testament to the fact that you can rise from the ashes. It's for you. This channel is for everyone who loves a good revenge story and the thrill of seeing justice served. We're not here for fairy tale endings. We're here for real, satisfying justice. If that sounds like your kind of vibe, hit that subscribe button right now and click the bell. I'll show you how true strength isn't about what you can build, but what you can rebuild. You won't want to miss what happens next. My story with Julian began not on Wall Street, but in a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment near a small college campus. We were in our late 20s, broke, and fueled by a shared dream. He had the swagger, the charm that could sell ice to an Eskimo, and a business degree from a decent state school. I had a mind for numbers that saw patterns where others saw chaos, a talent for financial modeling that was as natural to me as breathing. We were a perfect team. He was the face, I was the brain. He was the one schmoozing investors over expensive dinners. I was the one hunched over a laptop, writing the algorithms that would predict market shifts before anyone else even noticed. We called our first company Legacy Financial, a name that now feels like a sick joke. For 10 years, we were a 2-person army. I lived inside spreadsheets and data sets, building complex models that could forecast market movements with uncanny accuracy. Julian was the one who translated my genius into investor-friendly buzzwords. Our life was a blur of late nights, takeout coffee, and the shared thrill of watching our net worth tick up, dollar by painstaking dollar. We were partners, not just in business, but in life. He'd stand behind me while I coded, his hands on my shoulders, whispering, "You're a genius, Serafina. I'd be nothing without you." And I believed him. Every single word. Our wedding was simple, almost an afterthought. We were too busy closing our first major deal to plan anything extravagant. I wore a simple white dress I bought online for under $100, and we signed the papers at the courthouse. We had a toast with cheap champagne in the office, Julian promising me a 50-50 partnership. In business and in life? It was a promise I clung to. The company grew, just like we knew it would. Our first 7-figure year, our first high-rise office with a view of the city, our first time being featured in Financial Journal as a disruptive force. We were unstoppable. The change was slow. So slow I didn't see it coming. It started with small things. Julian would schedule client meetings without me, saying they were high level and not technical. He'd bring in new consultants I'd never heard of, charging exorbitant fees to our company's accounts. Then came Sloane. She arrived like a perfectly manicured tornado, all designer suits and fake smiles. She'd look at me with what I now recognize as a professional pity, as if my genius was some kind of quirky hobby. She started sitting in on my meetings, taking notes, asking questions that subtly undermined my authority. I was just too busy to notice. I was too busy building the company, too busy to see the walls closing in. But that's the most insidious part of betrayal, isn't it? It happens right under your nose. You're too close to the picture to see the frame is cracked. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags, the late-night work sessions at the office, The business trips Julian took alone, promising he'd call, but the calls never came. The way Sloane would touch his arm, laugh at his jokes, a little too familiarly. But I was still naive. I still believed in the dream we'd built, that 50-50 promise from a decade ago. It took one phone call, one overheard conversation, to change everything. I wasn't supposed to be in the office that evening. I had a rare night off, and I'd just finished making Julian's favorite pasta. I called him to say I was on my way, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Puzzled, I decided to drive to the office anyway, hoping to surprise him. The lights were on in his office. I heard voices, his and Sloane's. As I got closer, I heard her whisper, "So, you're really going to go through with it firing her?" The next words hit me like a physical blow. Julian's voice, cold and devoid of all emotion, replied, "It's a business decision, Sloane. She's a liability, and we'll get a full partnership out of it." My heart stopped. The world around me went silent. The pasta I was holding in my hand suddenly felt like a ton of bricks. It was at that moment I realized I was not a partner. I was just a pawn. This story, it didn't just start with a boardroom betrayal. It started years before, with a girl who just wanted to prove she was enough. Growing up, I was always the smart one, the one buried in books, the one who saw the world in numbers and logic. My brother, Michael, was the golden child, the athlete, the charmer, the one who could light up a room just by walking into it. My parents, they adored him. Every football game, every school play, they were there. When I won the state math competition, my dad gave me a pat on the back and said, "That's my girl. Now can you help Michael with his history homework?" I didn't mind. I never did. I just wanted a sliver of that recognition, a piece of that unshakable pride they had for my brother. So I worked harder. I became a straight-A student, got a full-ride scholarship to college, and later, a master's degree in finance. I thought if I could build something real and tangible, then they would finally see me. They would finally be proud. But even then, I was always the supporting player in my own life. I met Julian during my final semester. He was everything I wasn't: charismatic, loud, and full of big ideas. He saw my mind, not just my grades. He saw the potential in my algorithms, the power in my numbers. For the first time, someone saw my worth for what it was, not what it could do for someone else. When we started our company, I thought it was a true partnership. Julian handled the business side, the clients, the public face. I handled the core product, the tech, the code, the very heart of what we built. I poured every ounce of my being into it. I missed family vacations. I worked through anniversaries. I was always on call, always putting out fires, always making the impossible possible. And for a long time, it worked. The numbers don't lie. Our company, Legacy Financial, grew at an exponential rate. We were the talk of the town, the disruptive duo who were changing the game. My parents, for the first time, would introduce me at parties as our daughter, the CEO. It wasn't quite right, but it was closer than I'd ever been. They were proud of the success, not necessarily me. Julian, though, he was my whole world. He understood the late nights, the stress, the endless pursuit of perfection. He was my partner, my cheerleader, my best friend. Or so I thought. The first crack in our foundation wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, subtle shift. I remember a specific moment about 3 years ago. We were at a dinner with a major investor, a guy named Mr. Harrison. He was talking about the company's incredible predictive models. "It's all Serafina's doing," he said, looking at me with admiration. "That algorithm is a work of art." I smiled, feeling a rare moment of pride. Julian laughed, a little too loudly. "Brenda is our technical genius, for sure," he said, using my old name as if to diminish the moment. "But she'll be the first to tell you it takes a whole team to make it happen. My vision, my client relationships, that's what turns code into cash." The look on his face, it was almost imperceptible. A flash of something cold and calculating. A hint of an invisible boundary he'd just drawn between my work and his. "Mr. Harrison just nodded, but I felt a knot form in my stomach. The vision was ours. The work was ours. But Julian had just made it clear, in his own mind, that it was his company. And then came the big Wall Street Journal article, a huge feature on Julian, the boy wonder of fintech. They talked about his charisma, his leadership, his unrivaled vision. My name was mentioned once, buried deep in the article as his technical co-founder. They even used a picture of him alone, standing in our office with his back to the city skyline. I remember holding that magazine, staring at his perfect, smiling face and feeling a strange, unsettling chill. I confronted him about it. He brushed it off. "Of course. Honey, you know how these reporters are. They want a narrative, a hero. I'm just playing the game for us." I wanted to believe him, so I did. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as the work was getting done, as long as we were successful. But success, I learned, can be a breeding ground for selfishness. It changes people. It changed Julian. It made him believe the narrative the world was feeding him, that he was the visionary, the genius, the one who made everything happen, and I was just the support staff, the technical co-founder, the woman who happened to be in the background, a shadow in his spotlight. He started believing his own hype, and in doing so, he started forgetting who he was before all this, and who I was. The biggest lie he told, the one that hurt the most, was that we were a team, a real partnership. He started making decisions without me, hiring new people, making major strategic shifts. He said it was to take the pressure off me so I could focus on what I do best, the technical stuff. The real reason he was cutting me out? Slowly, deliberately, and with the kind of calculated precision that only a true partner can achieve. If you've ever had someone you love slowly, subtly, push you away, comment with a single word that describes the feeling, for me, it was hollow. The foundation of our relationship, the thing I thought was a rock, was just a facade built on a shifting landscape of ego and greed. And the real tragedy, I was so busy building the beautiful house that I didn't even notice the ground beneath us was turning to sand. It's funny how in a relationship, you can be so blind. You make yourself small to fit into their world, thinking it's a form of love. I did that. I sacrificed everything, and I didn't even see it happening. For years, my life was a constant loop of working, coding, and putting out fires. I was the one who worked all night, fueled by a single cold coffee, fixing a bug that threatened to shut down our whole system. I was the one who missed birthdays, who forgot to buy groceries, who lived in a constant state of low-grade anxiety because the company's integrity rested squarely on my shoulders. Julian, on the other hand, was the one who flew to Davos for a strategic summit, who was the star of every industry gala, who was praised for his unflinching leadership, I told myself this was okay. This was our deal. He handled the flash, and I handled the substance. The real shift began when he hired Sloane. I remember her first day. She glided into our open-plan office in a crisp, expensive blazer, her smile as sharp as her wit. Julian introduced her as our new head of marketing, and I was genuinely excited. Finally, someone could take over the endless social media campaigns and client presentations I secretly loathed. Sloane immediately started asking about my work. She'd sit beside me, watching my screens with a keen, analytical eye. "That's brilliant. Serafina," she'd say. "But is it scalable?" I didn't see the trap. I saw a colleague challenging me, pushing me to be better. I even invited her to our apartment for dinner, genuinely happy to have another woman in the male-dominated world of our startup. She started by asking me questions. Then she started making suggestions. Soon, her suggestions turned into recommendations, and her recommendations turned into demands. "Julian," she'd say during a meeting, "I've analyzed the Q3 reports. We need to streamline Serafina's processes. They're too complex for our sales team to explain to clients." Julian would nod, agreeing, and when I'd try to push back, he'd cut me off with a condescending smile. "Honey, Sloane's got a point. You know how you get lost in the technical weeds sometimes." That phrase, "lost in the technical weeds," became a weapon he used against me. A little dig. A subtle reminder that my work was seen as complicated and messy, while his and Sloane's was clean and efficient. It was never just about work, either. I remember one Friday night. I had to stay late to fix a major vulnerability that had appeared in our client-facing platform. I texted Julian, telling him I'd be home late. He just replied with a thumbs-up emoji. At around 11 p.m., I was on my 10th cup of coffee, running a final diagnostic test, when Julian and Sloane walked in, laughing. They were dressed up. Julian's tie loosened, Sloane's hair slightly disheveled. They had a stack of empty pizza boxes from a fancy Italian restaurant I knew was way out of our usual price range. "Hey, we thought we'd grab a slice," Julian said, his eyes avoiding mine. "You're still here." "The client portal," I mumbled, gesturing to my screen. "I found a vulnerability. Had to patch it before the weekend." Sloane just gave me a little head tilt, a look of professional pity. "That's dedication, Serafina. Julian and I were just finishing up the new Q4 marketing strategy. We went over every detail. You know how it is." No, I didn't know how it was. I didn't know about these impromptu late-night dinners, these marketing strategies that didn't include me. Julian's excuse was always the same. "You're too busy, honey. I didn't want to bother you." It was the perfect gaslighting technique. He used my dedication against me, my tireless work ethic. My commitment to the company's integrity was reframed as a weakness, a social handicap that kept me from being a part of the real work. I started feeling like a ghost in my own life. I'd come home late to a dark house, eat cold leftovers, and fall asleep on the couch waiting for him to get home. When I did wake up, he'd smell of a perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked him about it, he'd laugh and say, "Serafina, that's just a new cologne I'm trying. You're being paranoid." And I believed him. I started doubting my own senses, my own instincts. I thought maybe I was just tired, overworked, and stressed. But deep down, in that quiet place where you store the ugly truths you're not ready to face, I knew my perfect life was already gone. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Have you ever had a moment where you looked at someone you loved and realized they were a stranger? Tell me in the comments below what that moment felt like for you. My sacrifice wasn't just my time or my energy, it was my self-worth. It was my voice. I allowed myself to be pushed to the side, to be a silent partner, because I thought it was for the good of the company. I thought it was for our future. I didn't know that my sacrifice was just the prelude to a much darker play, and that the next act would begin with a betrayal so complete it would shatter my world. My mind went completely blank. The world around me, the smell of my favorite pasta, the sound of the air conditioning humming in the hallway, it all disappeared. I stood there, frozen, listening to the two people I had trusted most in the world talk about me like I was a faulty piece of equipment, a liability. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest so hard I was afraid they'd hear it. I peeked around the corner. Julian was sitting behind his desk, looking relaxed, confident. Sloane was perched on the edge, her hand on his arm, a gesture that was far too intimate to be professional. They were talking about me, my work ethic, my technical obsessions, my inability to see the big picture. They were building a case against me, a narrative they would present to the board. My brilliance, the thing Julian once praised, had become a weakness. I felt a cold rage I'd never experienced before. It wasn't the hot, impulsive anger that makes you want to shout. It was a cold, quiet fury that settled deep in my bones. I was so careful, so loyal, so dedicated. I gave everything to this company, to this man, to this life we built. And for what? For a secret conversation about how to get rid of me, I needed to see it, to have proof. Julian's old laptop, the one he'd given me to work on when my main computer was being upgraded, was sitting on his desk. It was always logged into his personal email. He never thought to lock it. He trusted me completely. The irony was so bitter. It almost made me laugh. I slowly pushed the office door open, trying to make as little noise as possible. The floorboards creaked. I froze. Was that someone? Sloane asked, her voice low. Julian just shrugged. Probably Gary from IT, getting a late-night coffee. Don't worry about it. I slipped inside, trying to appear nonchalant. Hey, babe, I said, my voice sounding foreign even to me. I was just driving by and saw the light on. Thought I'd bring you some dinner. I held up the pasta bag. It felt like a prop in a terrible play. Julian's face, for a split second, was a mask of pure panic. But he recovered instantly, plastering on that familiar, practiced smile. Honey, what a surprise. We were just finishing up. He glanced at Sloane, who was looking at me with a professional, placid expression. Sloane was just helping me with the Q4 budget. She's a real lifesaver. I can imagine, I said. My eyes fixed on the laptop screen. I could see the edge of an email preview on the screen. Subject, our new plan? My heart was hammering. Why don't you head on home? Julian said, taking the food from my hand. We'll finish up here. No need for you to wait up. He kissed my cheek. I could smell Sloane's perfume on his breath. It was a scent that had haunted me for months, and now I knew exactly why. I pretended to leave, walking slowly down the hallway, but instead of going to the elevator, I ducked into an empty conference room, the one with the two-way glass. From there, I could see right into his office without being seen. I watched as Sloane and Julian closed the laptop, their heads bent together in a conspiratorial whisper. They were laughing. They were celebrating my downfall. My heart didn't break. It solidified. This wasn't a sudden mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a plan. A calculated, deliberate act of betrayal by the two people I trusted most. It was a planned revenge story against me. And in that moment, as I watched them, I made a silent vow. He thought he was playing a game, so be it. I would play too, but I would play by my rules. I knew their motive. It wasn't just about money or power. It was about ego. Julian wanted to be the hero, the sole founder, the visionary. And Sloane wanted the position, the money, the access that came with being by his side. They wanted to erase my contribution, to pretend the genius was all Julian's, and that my hard work was just a minor detail. They wanted to write me out of our own story. I went home, but I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I went straight to my home office, logged into my personal network, and began. I started documenting everything. Every line of code, every algorithm, every email conversation about our strategic decisions. I made encrypted copies of everything. My mind, usually a whirlwind of creative financial modeling, became a steel trap of cold, hard facts. Julian may have had the office, but I had the data. He had the power, but I had the proof. If you had just one day to prepare for a financial and emotional war, what would be the very first thing you'd do? Comment below. My plan wasn't to fight. It was to wait. To let them make their move. And then, when they least expected it, I would show them exactly what a liability I could be. I would expose their lies, not just to the board, but to the entire world. And this time, I wouldn't be a background player. I would be the main event. I thought that overheard conversation was the end of everything, but in reality, it was just the beginning of my revenge story. You know that moment in a movie when the villain thinks they've won, the hero is down. All hope is lost, and the bad guy gives their big, evil monologue. Julian and Sloane were living that moment. They were high on their victory, drunk on their power. They thought they had everything. They had no idea I was about to be their worst nightmare. The next day, I went into the office with a fake smile plastered on my face. Julian was his usual charming self, a little too nice, a little too attentive. I'd catch him and Sloane sharing knowing glances, little secret smiles that said, "We've got this." They were so confident, so beautifully, arrogantly blind. The day of the big board meeting arrived. Julian called me into his office, a manila folder in his hands. My stomach was a knot of nerves and cold resolve. Sloane was there too, standing beside him like a proud puppet master. "Serafina," Julian said, his voice dropping an octave to his serious CEO tone. "We need to talk about your role here. Effective immediately. Your position is being terminated." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Sloane gave me a little head tilt, that same professional pity I'd seen before. "It's for the best. Serafina, the board agrees we need a more dynamic, forward-facing leader. My lawyer will be in touch," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Julian laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Don't bother. We've structured this so you get a severance package, but your ownership is null and void. We'll be liquidating your shares at their current value. A handsome payout, considering the circumstances." My heart pounded, but I held my ground. This was the moment. "You're right," I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. "It's a very handsome payout, but I think you'll find the value of those shares is about to change dramatically." I stood up, walked to the conference room door, and looked Julian and Sloane dead in the eyes. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just said, it was never about the money for me. It was about the dream. You just signed your company's death warrant, Julian, and you didn't even know it. With that, I walked out. I didn't even bother to pack my things, my personal items, my favorite coffee mug, the framed photos of Julian and me from our early days. They were all worthless now. The only thing that mattered was the one small, innocuous email I had sent to the board members just an hour before. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was just a single sentence with an attachment. A preliminary look at our Q3 financials. The attachment wasn't a simplified, corporate-friendly report. It was the raw data, the real numbers. The kind of data that showed Julian had been using shell companies to inflate our profit margins. The kind of data that showed our supposed growth was nothing more than a house of cards. The kind of data that proved every word of Julian's presentation to the board was a lie. I walked out of the building into the gray Seattle rain. I got into my car and didn't drive away. I sat there, watching my phone. And then the messages started coming. First, it was a text from an unknown number. What the hell is this? Serafina Julian's numbers don't add up. Then another. Is this real? Another. The entire board is in emergency session. The panic in their messages was a symphony to my ears. I could see them in my mind's eye. Julian, on the phone, his face red, trying to talk his way out of a lie. Sloane, looking at the raw data, finally realizing she had hitched her wagon to a fraud. They thought I was gone. They thought I was defeated. But I was still there, a ghost in their system, pulling the strings. The stock market reacted almost immediately. The public isn't stupid. Rumors of financial irregularities and a sudden, quiet termination of the company's founder sent our stock price plummeting. It wasn't a complete collapse yet, but it was a shockwave. It was a crisis. The first domino fell, and I knew a whole lot more were about to follow. I was watching the empire I built crumble in real time. I felt no remorse, only a cold, deep satisfaction. This was my justice. Suddenly, a knock on my car window. I jumped. A young man stood there, holding an umbrella. He was in a simple suit, a name tag on his lapel that read, Wyatt, Intern. Are you okay? He asked, his voice gentle. I saw you sitting here, and you just looked lost. I looked at him, a complete stranger, who had no idea what was happening. He didn't know I had just thrown a grenade into a $100 million company. All he saw was a woman in the rain. I'm fine, I said, my voice hoarse. He gave me a genuine, sympathetic smile. Okay. Well, if you need a place to grab a coffee, the diner on the corner is pretty good. My treat. I looked at his face, so earnest, so kind. This was my turning point. The betrayal, the anger, the chaos, it all led to this. I was broken, and I didn't know how to fix myself. But maybe, just maybe, this unexpected kindness was the first step. Have you ever been at your lowest point, only to have a complete stranger show you a kindness you didn't know you needed? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. This wasn't just a crisis. It was the end of one life and the beginning of another. And I didn't know it then. But this young man, this intern, was about to change everything. My life after walking out of that boardroom was a blur. The financial world was in chaos. Our stock price was free-falling. The news was everywhere. Legacy Financial hit by scandal. CEO Julian Carter under fire. Co-founder Serafina vanishes. I wasn't gone. I was just watching from the sidelines, finally free. That young man, Wyatt, the intern from the parking lot. He kept finding me. He'd show up at my favorite coffee shop, a little awkward at first, a little too eager to talk to me. He'd ask about my day, about the coffee, about anything other than the chaos his company was in. He seemed to genuinely care, and it was a kindness I hadn't received in years. After a few days, I learned that Wyatt's internship was just a part of his dad's grand plan. His father, Alexander Sterling, was a titan of Wall Street. Wyatt was supposed to be learning the ropes from the bottom up, but he was getting tired of the corporate structure and the rigid rules. He saw my story as a lesson in true genius and raw talent, something his father's company had lost. One afternoon, over coffee, Wyatt asked me about my old company. He had a look in his eyes that was both empathetic and a little too knowing. "That was some move you pulled," he said, his voice quiet. "That email, that was you, wasn't it?" I looked at him, surprised. "How did you know?" "My dad's been trying to figure out who blew the whistle," he said. "He knows it wasn't a disgruntled employee. The data was too clean, too precise. He said whoever did it was the only person who truly understood that company's heart and soul. He thinks it was you." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at him, at his open, honest face. He wasn't like Julian. He wasn't trying to charm or manipulate. He was just there. "You should let me help you," he said. "My dad's company has a legal team that can clear your name. We have resources. We can help you rebuild." I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "I don't need anyone's help. I built an empire once. I can do it again." "No offense," he said. And for the first time, a hint of his charm came through. "But you don't have to. You're not fighting a battle anymore. You're just cleaning up the mess. Let someone else take out the trash." That's when I knew he was different. He saw the mess I was in, the emotional toll it was taking on me, and he didn't try to sugarcoat it. He took me to meet his dad, Alexander Sterling. Alexander was exactly what I expected, a sharp, no-nonsense man who looked at the world as a series of chess moves. He didn't offer me a job. He offered me a chance at redemption. "I'll fund you," he said. "You'll have a blank check to rebuild your company your way. No strings attached. You get to be the CEO, the face, the brain. All you have to do is promise me one thing you'll make Julian pay for what he did." It wasn't a request. It was an order. He wasn't a good Samaritan. He was a shark who saw blood in the water. Julian's downfall would mean a big win for him, and I was his weapon. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was leaving one toxic relationship to enter another, but this time, I was in control. I had a choice. I thought about it all night. I thought about Julian and Sloane, about their greedy, desperate faces. I thought about all the years I'd spent in the shadows, and I knew what I had to do. The next day, I called Alexander and accepted his offer. I wasn't just going to rebuild, I was going to dominate, and Julian was going to be the first casualty. I wasn't just fighting for my company anymore, I was fighting for my dignity, my self-worth, and my name. Wyatt was thrilled. He was genuinely excited to be a part of my new company, a company that was being built on honesty, integrity, and pure talent. He wasn't just an intern. He was my first real ally. He wasn't Julian. He was someone who believed in me, truly believed in me. You know, it's not always about winning the war. Sometimes, it's about finding the right people to fight with you. What do you think is more important, talent or loyalty? Let me know in the comments below. For me, the answer is clear. Loyalty, hands down. Because talent can be bought. But loyalty is priceless. It was a lesson Julian was about to learn the hard way. After accepting Alexander Sterling's offer, a new fire was lit inside me. It wasn't the cold, consuming rage from before. This was a steady, burning flame of purpose. Wyatt and I started with a clean slate. My new company, aptly named Genesis Solutions, was built on two things: my financial models and Wyatt's raw, uncorrupted vision for the future. We didn't waste a second. While Julian was fighting to save a sinking ship, we were already building a whole new fleet. Wyatt was nothing like Julian. Julian saw my work as a tool for his own ambition. Wyatt saw it as an art form. He'd sit with me for hours, not to supervise, but to learn. He asked questions, real questions. How does this model predict that kind of volatility? What's the psychological profile behind a market trend? He wasn't just interested in the numbers, he was interested in the story behind them. And in a strange way, he was helping me fall in love with my work again, without the weight of Julian's ego on my shoulders. He also helped me heal. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just working, I was living. We'd grab burgers from a food truck, laugh at terrible movies, and just talk. Not about business, but about our lives, our dreams, our failures. His respect wasn't just for my mind. It was for me, as a person. I was learning that loyalty was a two-way street, and that a real partnership was about more than a contract. The final act of Julian's downfall was both anticlimactic and profoundly satisfying. The lawsuits from the initial email piled up. The financial irregularities I'd exposed sent investors running for the hills. The board, terrified of federal investigation, forced Julian out, stripping him of his CEO title. He went from being a Wall Street prodigy to a cautionary tale overnight. But the final confrontation wasn't in a boardroom. It was at my front door, on a rainy Tuesday night. I saw him through the peephole. Julian, the man who once commanded rooms with a single glance, now looked like a ghost. His suit was wrinkled, his hair was disheveled, and the arrogance was gone from his eyes, replaced with something I hadn't seen in years' desperation. I opened the door. But I didn't invite him in. He stood there, soaked by the rain, and for the first time, he looked at me, really looked at me, not at the Serafina he created for himself, but at the woman he had destroyed. Serafina, I was a fool, he began, his voice cracking. Please, the company is collapsing. The stock is worthless. I've lost everything. I need you to come back. You're the only one who can save it. I just stared at him. He wasn't begging for me back as a partner. He was begging me to fix his mess. He wanted my genius, but he didn't want me. I can't, I said, my voice steady. I don't work there anymore. I'll give you everything, he pleaded. The company, the title, the majority stake, whatever you want. Just, please. I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow emptiness. You're right, I said. You were a fool. You had a real partner, a real woman, a real future, and you threw it all away for an ego boost and a pretty face who abandoned you the second things got tough. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a news alert. I looked at it, then back at him. Julian, I said, I think you should check the news. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking. He saw the headline, Sloane Rodriguez implicated in financial fraud scheme. She did this, he stammered. She used my accounts to— You two were a two-person army, remember? I said, using the words he once used to describe us. She just finished the job you started. His face went pale. He finally realized the full extent of his betrayal. Sloane didn't just want him. She wanted everything, and she was smart enough to let him take the fall. I'm sorry, he whispered, a single tear running down his face. I'm so sorry, Serafina. But it was too late. I closed the door, leaving him standing in the rain. Sloane's punishment wasn't prison. It was a fate far worse for a person like her. The news spread like wildfire. She was a pariah in the financial world. Every company, every bank, every consulting firm blacklisted her. She disappeared from social media, her name a symbol of greed and betrayal. The last I heard, she was managing a small hedge fund in some forgotten corner of the country, forever marked as the woman who tried to steal an empire. And me, I wasn't Serafina the betrayed wife anymore. I wasn't just Serafina the genius. I was the co-founder of Genesis Solutions, a company built on a foundation of integrity and an unwavering commitment to truth. Wyatt and I, we were a real team. We didn't need grand titles or lavish parties. We had each other's backs. Our company thrived, not because we were ruthless, but because we were honest. Julian had lost everything: his company, his reputation, and the woman who loved him. He never came back. His story was a painful lesson in arrogance and the high cost of betrayal. My story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. It's about finding your worth not in someone else's approval, but in your own strength. It's about learning that the person who can bring you to your knees is also the only one who can stand you back up. This isn't just my story. It's a reminder for every person out there who has ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or betrayed. Your value is not defined by those who fail to see it. It's defined by what you do when you're finally free. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt the pain of betrayal or the fire of a comeback, I want to hear from you in the comments. And if you're ready to start your own journey of healing and triumph, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'll be here every week, sharing more stories about rising from the ashes, finding your power, and getting the sweet, sweet justice you deserve. Don't miss it.